Chris Lee and Blayne Gilmer of Southeastern 14 here to preview Mississippi State's road trip to Auburn. Yeah, not confusing Mississippi State with Ole Miss right now for sure, the way that team is playing offensively. Not confusing Auburn with Ole Miss either on offense either. Speaking of Ole Miss, Auburn saw Ole Miss in Auburn last week, played the Rebels to win 7 points but did not win. And now they'll get Mississippi State. Auburn is a 6-point favorite, playing at home in Jordan-Hare Stadium, 43-point over-under, making for a predicted final of 25-19 in Mississippi State's, in Auburn's favor. ESPN's FPI has Auburn as a 6-point favorite. SP Plus has Auburn a 3-point favorite. Team rankings and Sagarin also have Auburn as a 6-point favorite. So anywhere from 3 to 6 is the word. But hey, look, if Will Rogers doesn't play this game, it may be the first team to 3 that wins, period.
Yeah, it could be a rock fight for sure. And we already saw one of those that you mentioned with the Bulldogs having taken on Arkansas in a game that I said, Chris, set back the game of college football 30 years. I mean, it was rough in terms of offensively, but defense, you got to give Zach Arnett credit. He knew where his bread was buttered. I mentioned it in our reaction show on Saturday night. I thought it was hilarious, the sideline interview when the reporter came up to him and said, "Did you think about going for it on 4th down in Arkansas's territory?" He said, "Have you seen what our defense is doing?" He said the only points they scored was when we turned the ball over in our own territory, and that was a field goal we gave up. He said, "No, we're punting them deep, and they're not going to score." Is basically what he said, and he was right. They were not going to score. You continue to have Watson play great at linebacker there, forcing all kinds of havoc and stuff like that. So that is the calling card of this Zach Arnett team. And we know what the calling card of the Hugh Freeze team is. They're going to play good defense. They're going to run the football, but they're going to have absolutely abysmal quarterback and wide receiver play. And now we're just going to see if any of those things change for either teams, or is it like the great Dennis Green said, they are who we thought they were, but who lets the other off the hook is the question.
You recommended a quick kick for South Carolina in another video. We might recommend it for both teams here. And who's playing quarterback is going to be a storyline. Let's start with Mississippi State. We're doing this Sunday night. We don't know about Will Rogers. If it is not Will Rogers, you get the furthest thing possible from Will Rogers in terms of style. That's Mike Wright, who threw a pick on the first play last game, ended up winning because his team ended up scoring 7 points, and that was enough to beat Arkansas. Mike Wright, a 10,800-meter guy, won a couple of games as a starter for Vandy a year ago, but the accuracy wanes for sure. The legs are another thing. Speaking of legs, Joquavius Marks, we don't know if he's going to be available or not. He had one injury coming in, I think suffered a second injury in that game, was limping all over the place. Mississippi State has had an identity crisis at different times this season. Before I had a quarterback crisis. Look, it's been ugly. Here's the stats for you, though. The stats don't look quite as bad as the optics have at times, maybe. But State averaging 26.9 points a game. Auburn giving up 29.3. Mississippi State is exactly 50-50 on run-pass balance. 5.9 yards per pass play, 5.3 per rush play, 6.4 per pass play. Auburn giving up 5 flat and 6.6 in those. Mississippi State turning it over a little under 2% of the time. Auburn forcing turnovers at a nearly 3% rate. Forced a couple against Ole Miss in the first half of that game, which kept it interesting. Auburn secondary, which was not healthy early in the year, starting to get healthier. That made a big difference in that Ole Miss game. Donovan Kaufman was a beast in that one. Had a couple other guys who got back and made a difference. Yeah, Auburn has been stingy against most anybody, and now it's got to be licking its chops against Mississippi State if State can't get Will Rogers back.
This has got to be the first week that Auburn can say, hey, we can just put our defense out against our own offense and get our scout look this week, because that's basically what it's going to be if Will Rogers can't play.
Right.
Terrible quarterback play and trying to run the football as much as you can. If Woody Marks can't play, if he's limited in any way, then that's really bad news for Mississippi State. And he Chris, I don't know about you. I'm no doctor, but man, it just looked like at times he shouldn't even have been continuing to try to go. So you got to give that man credit for the intestinal fortitude he displayed for being able to try to gut through the injury and things like that. But Mike Wright was 8 of 12, 85 yards passing. 30 of those came in one play to Justin Robinson, who he was also questionable coming into the game last week for Mississippi State. So health is an issue, but health is trending in the right direction. As you said, for Auburn, they got Austin Keys back from that thumb surgery, and he played well against Ole Miss. Keontae Scott played well against Ole Miss. It was just, eventually Auburn couldn't do enough offensively to keep their defense off the field, and they eventually got worn down. But Auburn plays inspired football at Jordan-Hare Stadium, particularly on that defensive side of the ball, Chris. And I think with having the Kaufmans and the Scotts and the Keys back on defense, it's going to be very, very difficult for Mississippi State to get anything going, particularly if Mike Wright is at quarterback for the Bulldogs. They also had Rylan Godey on offense. A tight end was a little bit limited coming into the game last week. So at this, what we always say, Chris, you're never 100% after the opening game in the SEC, but now even more so, it seems to be becoming a war of attrition. And, if we're going with the war analogy, Auburn's getting some of its troops back on the defensive side of the ball. So then that might be a little edge for them on that side.
All right. When Auburn's got the ball, I would expect a timeshare between Robbie Ashford and Peyton Thorne, because that's what we've seen pretty much all year. Auburn finally got a 100-yard passing game out of one of its quarterbacks against the Power 5 team. That was Ashford, who hit 100 on the nose, but it was not pretty otherwise. Auburn's got major trouble in terms of finding targets. The Tigers scoring 26.7 a game, State giving up 25.7. Auburn runs it 59% of the time, 5.3 yards per rushing play. The passing's just been ugly. I think they settled in at 3 yards an attempt or something like that Saturday. Probably a little better than that, but point is it was ugly, but it's been kind of ugly for Mississippi State too. This is the team that, other than South Carolina and maybe Vandy, might have the worst pass defense in the league, although it did shut down Arkansas pretty handily last week. That might have had more to do with Arkansas than it did State. But Zach Arnett did take back the play calling duties. That made a big difference. And as you pointed out, they've got some dudes on this side of the ball. And, oh, by the way, speaking of dudes, Jarquez Hunter made an appearance for Auburn, and I would expect we'll see him this week. And that makes a big difference in their offense, because I thought they had some zone read stuff going there for a little bit against Ole Miss. Blayne?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's the RPO game or whether it's the straight read option game, power read, different kind of stuff that Hugh Freeze can do with quarterbacks. Listen, Peyton Thorne's way more athletic than I ever thought he would be. Honestly, coming from Michigan State, I thought he was more of a pocket passer type guy. He's got some wiggle to him. I think you might have said it was Ashford that had 100. It was actually Thorne that had 100 passing, but still, not enough in that passing game. We mentioned in the reaction show, and like we said, guys, if you're not tuning into those, you need to make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get those notifications when we do go live on stuff. But listen, your leading receiver in terms of receptions was Ronaldo Fairweather at tight end, which is fine. I mean, that's good. But Jarquez Hunter was second at running back with 3 receptions behind Fairweather's 5, and then 4 receivers with 1 reception on the day. Chris, we've talked about it. There is just a dearth of talent at the wide receiver position for Auburn. They are just void of any kind of weapon out there on the outside, and it shows. It puts a lot of pressure on the Auburn offensive line to be perfect and fitting those runs, because they can't afford a stuff play, a play that gets stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage, because that puts them then behind the 8 ball in terms of staying on schedule to be able to continue to run the football, because they're so reluctant to pass the football. So I don't know. I think in this one, that with Zach Arnett and the pride that he takes in that defense, and I think he, like you mentioned, is more involved now, particularly after this Arkansas game, in calling the plays and getting this thing designed up. I think that he's going to take great pride in trying to be able to stop the run of Auburn. He's got a lot of good film to go back and watch, whether it's that Georgia tape, see what Georgia tried to do to him, and Georgia struggled a little bit with that quarterback run, and then also Ole Miss now. So he's got a lot of tape to go back and review. Also LSU. And a good defensive mind like Zach Arnett's going to be able to find a way to scheme things up. So, Chris, I don't know. I mean, you never know what to expect in SEC games, but if there's one number on this whole graphic down here I'm pretty confident in, look at that 43 for the over-under that you mentioned. I feel pretty comfortable that it could go under that. I mean, I really do. This is going to be a rock fight, and from what I see here. Now, watch both of them go out and put up 30 points, and now that we say that. But, that would be very shocking. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're going the over on that one, I would like to know what that I don't after watching these two teams. Although, Will Rogers being healthy and them playing to his strengths would make a difference. And he did have, if he does play, will have had 3 weeks off since what was, I think, a left shoulder injury, and he throws right-handed. So, yeah, I guess if you want to play devil's advocate on that, if you do the points scored, points allowed for these teams and do the over under that way, it's closer to 52. But those numbers have also been built up with some, UMass's and Samford's on the schedule there too from the offensive side. So yeah, I expect a defensive struggle. Auburn has been pretty tough at home, as Georgia found out. Ole Miss played them within 7. Auburn did get a score late, but crazy stuff happens to Jordan-Hare. Now, look, Mississippi State did just go and spoil Arkansas's homecoming, so I wouldn't rule it out. But I just feel like I'm going to take Auburn at home in this one.
Yeah, I definitely do not want to go against Auburn with that environment. I think it's one of the best environments of all of college football. I think it's one of the biggest home field advantages in all of college football. That place gets loud. If Mike Wright is at quarterback for Mississippi State and he does get held behind the chains at times, because Auburn is going to sell out to stop the run, and then it's a obvious passing down, I think you'll see Auburn be able to get after him a little bit and pressure him, make it hard for him to complete passes down the field, especially after going 8 of 12 with a pick in his previous game on the road. So give me Auburn to win this game, and I think Auburn will actually cover in this game because I think their defense will stymie Mississippi State if Will Rogers does not play. Now, that, of course, that changes. If Will Rogers does, I would probably if Will Rogers plays, I'm picking Auburn in a very close one.
All right, we're previewing all the games for Week 9 in the SEC. Best way to get those is to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics, and enable your notifications so you see all our previews. Got basketball stuff coming up. Got all kinds of stuff coming up here at Southeastern 14. Got a daily show, 11 to about 11:45 Monday to Friday, so be sure to catch that. Anyway, thank you for watching here at Southeastern 14. For Blayne Gilmer, I'm Chris Lee. We'll see you again soon.